I want to thank you all for being here for Todd Matthews' birthday celebration. I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Waxhaw Board of Commissioners. If you would, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have not received any changes to the agenda. Does anybody have any? If not, I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We have no one signed up for the informal public comments, so we'll move to the consent agenda. Entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next up, some presentations. Dina Sabinski from Parks and Rec.
Hello. We're going to start off with Autumn Treasures. This weekend is one of our largest events for the town of Waxhaw. We're starting up on Friday night with a concert downtown at near the bridge and the brewery area. We would love to have y'all come out from 7 to 9. Also on the 14th, the festival's full swing, 10 to 5, and again on Sunday from 12 to 5. You'll see new this year, we're going to do a skate race at the skate park on Sunday. It's a great way for kids to come out and show their skills, so please join us for that. We have this year not only 30, but 31 barbecue teams, so we added another one this week. That festivities is happening on Saturday with public tasting happening that afternoon. All the proceeds from the public tasting is going to our own Waxhaw Elementary School. We have over 75 crafters also, and then we have businesses mixed in with the crafters this year, and then 2 music stages. That is new this year. You'll see the lineup on our website. Again, Friday night's our first night starting off with a concert, and then on the stage Saturday and Sunday is jam up the entire time on both stages. New this year, we have the food court near the brewery area. That whole road on North Main Street is just going to be the whole food court. Also, new this year, the kids zone is under the water tower. Everything's included, and then we have our fun foods in there as well. Again, the skate race starts on Sunday, 1 to 5. We have the forms at our Park and Rec office, and then there's sign up again at the facility at the time of the race.
Any questions for Dina about Autumn Treasures?
She has 2 more.
I know. Okay. You have ample volunteers?
We're always loving more volunteers, and that's so
So where do they sign up?
you're building me up for my
Okay,
next
good.
thing. Awesome. Next slide. Next slide is our community building. Volunteers. We are always looking for wonderful volunteers that basically want to give back to their community. And what we're going to do is start on at Autumn Treasures. We're going to have ways that you can sign up for different theme elements for the new Parks and Rec. So, what is a Waxhaw leader volunteer? That person is enthusiastic, positive individual and wants to enhance our Waxhaw community by giving up their time and talents. We're looking for your gifts on what you're good at, what you're passionate about, to come and help us to make our, build on our community through events and programming, also with our new parks that are coming online soon, and to help out just basically building up our community. And where I think Park and Rec kind of, its goal is to be the glue. So we are the sticky glue that brings us all together, and that's through parks and that's through events and programming. Any questions on volunteers?
Do you have any time periods over the weekend that you're void of some volunteers that you would like us to,
We have.
you could recruit right now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay?
We have a Survey Monkey on the website that we have a couple spots on, block captains are still open. There's some early riser spots that we desperately need help with, just helping vendors get into their spot. And also with the barbecue contest, helping give out the little tickets and things like that in the afternoon. So those would be wonderful
And they
areas that you can volunteer.
find the Survey Monkey off of our website?
Yes, sir. Under events. Park enhancements. I am thrilled to tell you what we're moving forward on. Of course, our parks are our community gathering place, and that builds on our live, work, play community. Town Creek is going to get some improvements coming up this year into next year. We're going to add a shelter and a universal, multi-generational, nature-themed playground. So I'm really excited about that. And then we're also going to work with our capital improvement project on adding more to that park in the future. Nesbitt Park is where our ball fields are at. We're working on a branded theme, restroom, concession, and storage unit. This is desperately needed for this park, and we're very excited. It was already a budgeted item, so we're excited about this improvement, and that will be installed in 18. And again, we'll be working on phase 2 for that park with adding sidewalks and parking and possible playground in the future. Any questions about park enhancements?
This fiscal budget
We're in this fiscal
for phase 1? Any questions? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on to reports before we get to the public hearing. We're going to mix it up a little bit. I'll kick it off. I have three items. First of all, thank you to all that have shared, commented, and read Waxhaw Happenings. Happenings has reached close to 6,000 people 10 days into the month, which is 5 times the number from a few short months ago. Your feedback helps us make and shape our communication become better and more effective. And as always, if you have any questions or you want different things addressed, communications@waxhaw.com. We're trying to make it better each and every month. Today we had the ribbon cutting, and a privilege. It was my privilege, along with Commissioner Burns and Commissioner Burl and Commissioner Warner, to with our Union County Chamber of Commerce partners, to welcome the Mill on Main to Waxhaw today. It was a proud moment, and we thank them for several reasons. One, they gave Rodman Heath Cotton Mill a second life, and that's fabulous for this town. They respected our heritage through their extensive restoration efforts. If you get a chance, go over there and you will see that they repurposed and reused as much as they humanly could. We thanked them for creating some excitement. They had made the additional announcement of their restaurant and bar that will opened shortly after the first of the year, and we're able to see firsthand the reuse of wood from the mill to build the new restaurant area. And finally, we shared that we're humbled by the fact that they've chosen to move their business into the mill, from Charlotte into the mill, and run their business from Waxhaw. And that's very, very positive news. Some clarifications. So I get questions, we all get questions from citizens as information is flying around in campaign season. I get it, we all get it, it is what it is. But there are some things that I just have to stand up and clear up. Let me clarify one thing. We do not have a $1.9 million shortfall in the budget. We're required by law to submit via the town manager, and as a board, we approve a balanced budget. We have a policy that earmarks significant dollars to reserve that the state, significantly more dollars than what the state requires to mitigate any risk that we have. And as we learned at the recent League of Municipality conference that several of us attended, this is the #1 emerging technique that towns are using to mitigate their risk as things happen, unforeseen events happen. We've been very clear on, we have a number of needs and wants that are not included in that balanced budget. How we fund those is a process that we started 3 years ago, first by modernizing our financial system and establishing departments, by doing some true budgeting that showed the capital side, and this year with Manager Ferguson, we're actually taking capital budgeting to a new level and creating a 5 to 7 year capital improvement plan that identifies the various projects and forces the policymakers, all of us, to prioritize the wants and the needs. So again, we don't have a shortfall, but boy, do we have a list of wants and needs that is sitting out there. And we're going to have to do some real hard work to prioritize that. Lastly, probably the #1 question or the #1 phone call generator that I've had is the property across the street, the Nixon property, the 27 acres. The parcel's surrounded by Waxhaw. It's not within Waxhaw. It's governed by Union County. We affectionately refer to it as a donut hole. When the state legislature changed the laws for annexation, they created many of these similar situations. It's something we deal with, live with, and address the challenges. As required by state law, our Highway 16 corridor plan and our future land use map conveys how we would use that property, or could be used in Waxhaw. At no time, contrary to some of the things that are out there, did the developer express any interest whatsoever in our stated usage. At no time was any plan presented that outlined housing or townhomes. And at no time did we convey a plan for that property. We did answer a math problem regarding theoretical densities without any assumptions or caveats. Most importantly, though, what we did do is respond as a board and conveyed our concerns, especially traffic impact, and with the usage abutting the Camberley neighborhood to Union County. The Union County Commissioners voted 3-2 in favor of zoning a change from residential to commercial. As a board, we respect that is their authority, that is their right. We respect their decision, and we move forward. They're tough decisions, and we respect them for having gone through the process, a 3-meeting process to get to final decision. Yes, it's commercial. Yes, it will impact us with a significant amount of additional traffic. We were able to successfully get the county to listen and understand some of our concerns, and specifically they have put some conditions that will attempt to buffer more stringently the back area near Camberley, which is a neighborhood in which we were fighting for. And the developer also agreed to some NCDOT conditions that have yet to be defined, and our staff is working with DOT. So again, that's the Nixon property, the 27 acres, and hopefully that clarifies some things. Commissioner Warner. Everything?
I have nothing this evening.
Commissioner Stewart?
I'm good.
Commissioner Fitzgerald?
Nothing this evening.
Commissioner Burrow?
Just to reiterate what Steve said about the mill on Main Street, it's a very, very fine project. It's well done. They respected the original building. They respected the town. They respected the process to get done. They've really done something special in Waxhaw. If you get a chance, go by, take a look at it. It's architecturally very, very interesting, very update, and it's very beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I genuinely want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. It's been a while since we've had a full house like this, and I completely understand why everyone is here. I also understand that with children of school age and parents working and ball and dance and every other extracurricular activity, you don't have time to come out here every other Tuesday night to take part in this. We have offered, and we do want you to go look at YouTube channel for Town of Waxhaw. All of our meetings are live streamed, and then if you can't catch it live, they're recorded. You can go back and look at any of the meetings that are there. We also, through the Town of Waxhaw website, waxhaw.com, have all the agendas and all the minutes from the previous meetings. So I encourage you to keep participating, and thank you for coming out.
It is the first time we had the fire marshal visit and do a head count to make sure we were okay. Manager Ferguson.
I don't have a report this evening, so.
Okay, on to the business at hand. I will entertain a motion to open public hearing for Cureton Town Center Modular Classroom Edition CU-006-333-2017.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's start with Chaplain Spencer. You have some housekeeping you'd like to do with us.
I do. The public hearing involves a request for an amendment to a conditional use permit, and this type of hearing requires a quasi-judicial hearing. This is somewhat rare in Waxhaw. We really don't have too many of the quasi-judicial hearings, so I want to explain both for the public and remind this board of the requirements. And one of the reasons we don't have that many is the zoning classification of which this property is included in. The town stopped that in 2009, so we don't see a lot of these. So quasi-judicial hearing requirements, what are they? Anybody that's going to present evidence is actually a witness, so the witnesses need to be sworn in. They must provide relevant and competent evidence. What does that mean? It's got to be about the application. It's got to be about the findings of fact, and we'll go through those briefly, and those will be part of the presentation. And any witness is also subject to cross-examination. That's questioning from other people. The board, you must make a decision based upon the evidence presented at the public hearing. You must also disclose any what we call ex parte communication. Ex parte communication doesn't disqualify you as long as you can be fair and impartial, but that is just information that you may have received regarding this permit application outside of the hearing. Most of us in here know there is a lawsuit filed regarding the zoning process, but that's different than the permit. The permit is actually the request that they're making and all the evidence that's going to be submitted. And I have briefed the board about the lawsuit, obviously, but that's not about the permit tonight. They're two different and separate events. The board must not be biased, must be able to make a fair and impartial decision. Conditions, there can be conditions placed upon, if the board is inclined to grant the permit, it must be reasonable, related to the use, and the applicant must agree to the conditions. So if you have some of these conditions, it's always good to go ahead and discuss those during the public hearing with the applicant. Any types of questions that you have regarding the conditions, go ahead and get those out on the table and get the response back from the applicant. The 4 findings of fact, those will be in the presentation, so I'm going to be very brief. They're printed, but the use has to be allowed in the zoning district. If granted, it won't materially endanger public health and safety. Must meet all the required conditions and specifications, and then there's a harmony requirement that if the permit's granted, it'll be harmonious with the surrounding area. So with all this formality, I'd like to ask each of the board members these questions just to put on the record and make sure everything is disclosed. And I'm going to start with Commissioner Warner and work my way around it. I'm going to be brief, but this is important. So Commissioner Warner, do you have a fixed opinion that's not susceptible to change regarding this request or this permit application?
No, I do not.
Okay. Can you make a fair and impartial decision based upon the evidence presented at the hearing?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Do you have any ex parte communications that we discussed earlier that need to be disclosed or that you should disclose? And that would include a site visit.
No, I have not even had a site visit. I read it yesterday.
Okay. Commissioner Burns, do you have a fixed opinion regarding this permit application that is not susceptible to change?
No.
Can you make a fair and impartial decision based upon the evidence presented at this public hearing?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have any ex parte communications regarding this permit application or site visits that should be disclosed?
I attended a parent meeting at the church
Okay.
prior to any application. But there's no reason that meeting would change my mind one way or the other.
And you can base your decision based upon what is presented at the public hearing?
Absolutely.
That's all I've got. Commissioner Hunt, do you have a fixed opinion that's not susceptible to change on this permit application?
No, sir.
Can you make a fair and impartial decision based upon the evidence presented at the public hearing?
Yes, sir.
And do you have any ex parte communications regarding this permit application or site visits?
I did make a site visit on my own, my personal vehicle. It's been about a month. Let's see, we're in October. It's about 2 months ago. I had never been on the property of the church or attended the church, but I did drive back there just to take a look at what the land looked like, what the layout looked like, and with no application, I didn't have an idea, kind of an idea, but no certain idea of it. That's the only thing.
And with that, you can still make a decision based upon the evidence presented tonight?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, do you have a fixed opinion that's not susceptible to change regarding this permit application?
No, sir.
Can you make a fair and impartial decision based upon the evidence presented at the public hearing?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any ex parte communications, including site visits, that should be disclosed?
Regarding the permit, no, but pre-permit application, I had several conversations, and I'll go
please.
through them. In the spring, I communicated with Union Day Charter Board member Mark Brody on the process, explained that it was administrated and directed him to staff at the time. It was Manager Warren Wood. I participated at the property owner's request, Forest Hill, in a meeting with the property owner, Representative Brody, and staff, where staff explained and walked through the process that they would have to go through, and that was on June 30th of this year. Once you were in receipt of the lawsuit, at your request, I came over to Town Hall and signed an affidavit that articulated the conversations that I had with Mark Brody. I requested from the legislative staff in Raleigh to examine the state statutes and Waxhaw Studio to ensure that we were objective and fair, and they responded to that. And since the application, the property owner, Mr. Baumgartner, has called me a couple of times with clarification questions of the process. Any question that had to do with the application was directed to the town manager.
Okay. And in light of those disclosures, can you still remain fair and impartial?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Burrell, do you have a fixed opinion that is not susceptible to change regarding this permit application?
I do not.
Can you make a fair and impartial decision based upon the evidence presented at the public hearing?
Absolutely.
Do you have any ex parte communications regarding this permit applications and/or site visits that should be disclosed?
None.
All right. Commissioner Fitzgerald, do you have a fixed opinion that is not susceptible to change regarding this permit application?
No, sir.
Can you make a fair and impartial decision based upon the evidence presented at the public hearing?
Yes, sir.
And do you have any ex parte communications and/or site visits that need to be disclosed?
No, sir.
Okay. That's all I've got for my background information. We will need to have all the witnesses that are going to be presenting sworn in.
So at this time, will the three individuals that signed up for public comments, as well as those that are going to be presenting to the board, please come forward so we can swear you in? Okay, at this time, we will bring Lisa McCarter forward. And just to remind everybody, this is a request by the applicant, Union Day School, on behalf of the property owner, Forest Hill Church, for a major amendment to the conditional use permit for Curitan Town Center to allow an additional principal building, a 7,872 square foot modular classroom on the Forest Hill Church site. The proposed modular building will be located on tax parcel 06162-005A on the north side of Kensington Drive behind the existing Forest Hills Church building. Lisa?
Okay. All UDO and state statutory requirements have been met for this public hearing. This is a major conditional use permit amendment request to the existing conditional use permit for Curitan Town Center to allow a modular classroom to be placed on the Forest Hill Church property behind the existing church. The presentation and staff report tonight are based on the originally submitted application and major conditional use permit amendment site plan that was submitted on August 30th, 2017. Here's an aerial of the proposed site. This was actually before Forest Hill Church was built. The property is located on the north side of Kensington Drive between Fifth Third Bank and Curitan. The property is zoned CUC3 conditional use general commercial and is approximately 10.381 acres in size. To the north is a single-family residential dwelling zoned Union County R40 single-family residential. To the south, the existing parking lot and retail building for Curitan Town Center, zone CUC3. To the east, Fifth Third Bank and the Curitan Town Center, zone CUC3, and also a property to the east, zoned R1. To the west, Curitan Residential Subdivision, zone CU-R3 PRD, conditional use single-family residential plan unit development. A conditional use permit for Curitan Town Center was approved by the Waxhaw Board of Commissioners in 2003, and this property was included in that plan. Conditions of the Curitan Town Center approval included Curitan design guidelines, and the UDO in effect at the time of approval was the December 2002 UDO. The major conditional use permit amendment is for the placement of a 7,872 square foot modular classroom building behind the Forest Hill Church parking lot. Currently, a school with enrollment of up to 425 students is allowed on the site within the existing Forest Hill Church building. The applicant is not requesting an increase in the enrollment of 425 with the placement of the building. These are the proposed elevations for the modular building. A school use is allowed in the C3 zoning district with conditional approval and supplemental regulations and is considered a separate principal use according to the UDO. The UDO requires that additional principal uses located on the same lot be required to have a 20-foot easement for access to the public street for service or emergency vehicles. The required easement is not shown on the original proposed plan. Supplemental regulations for schools require that outdoor speakers be at least 50 feet from residential property lines. The side and rear elevation of the school are approximately 50 feet or less from residentially zoned properties. The other supplemental regulations for schools in the 2002 UDO is that there must be access onto a major or minor thoroughfare or collector road. The proposed location is behind the existing Forest Hill Church parking lot, so it does not have the required road access. This is the site as shown on the 2003 Curitan Town Center conditional use permit plan, which denotes shopfront retail and office uses for the site that are pedestrian-oriented and line the street. There were no principal buildings shown that did not have street frontage or access. Shops are shown as fronting on Kensington Drive. This is the approved cross-section for Kensington Drive up at the top left. The proposed modular classroom building does not front the road. Architectural controls note 2 on the Curitan Town Center plan requires a minimum of 50% of the material used for the front and side elevations to be predominantly brick. The other 50% can be made of wood, stone, stucco, synthetic wood. Note 3 states that the rear elevation may be constructed of concrete block painted to match the predominant color of the front and side facades. The proposed modular classroom building is hardy plank on all elevations and does not comply with these requirements. According to the approved Curitan design guidelines, the purpose of the master plan and architectural guidelines are to regulate the detailed aspects of the development of Curitan. The intent of the guidelines is to complement the character and history of the town of Waxhaw. The guidelines will also help ensure consistency and quality over the implementation of the development. The proposed modular classroom does not meet this intent. According to the Cureton Commercial Mixed Use and Multifamily Guidelines, Building Site and Streetscape, primary building facade should be parallel to the sidewalk or right-of-way, except where there is desire to maintain a highly desirable vista. The proposed building does not meet this requirement. The Cureton Design Guidelines require that all utilities and HVAC units be located or screened to prevent view from within, outside the site, and from the street, and shall not be located along the front or side elevations of any building that faces the street. Ground screening should be of a solid fence or wall in keeping with the building, or native plant materials. The HVAC units are not screened in the proposed plan. The red arrows point to the HVAC units along the elevations of the modular classroom building. The Cureton Design Guidelines require buildings over 60 feet wide to be broken down into a series of smaller elements or bays for the facade and roof to match the rhythm of the historic shop fronts. This is an example of an acceptable building from the guidelines. The proposed modular classroom building is not broken down into smaller elements and does not meet that requirement. And also the roof material is not labeled. The guidelines require the roof to be dimensioned architectural grade laminated asphalt or composition shingles. The landscaping shown on the proposed plan is not changing and is compliant with the 2002 UDO and the approved Cureton Town Center conditional use permit. A technical memo was drafted by Kimley Horn, the town's engineering consultant, to address internal traffic circulation. The applicant indicated that they will have one drop-off location and walk the children to the modular building. Kimley Horn has recommended that there be two drop-off locations so that children would not have to walk across the parking lot while cars are circulating. If this is not possible, they recommend having a crossing guard at each location where children would cross a vehicle path to escort the students safely. The Union County Fire Marshal's Office has a primary responsibility of enforcing the North Carolina Fire Prevention Code. Review of the site by the Union County Fire Marshal is necessary for schools. Staff has not received feedback from the Union County Fire Marshal. Waxhaw Fire Marshal had preliminary comments that fire apparatus access shall be within 150 feet of all exterior walls of a non-sprinkled building. There were 5 sedimentation and erosion control comments and notes to add to the plan. The future land use plan from the Waxhaw Comprehensive Plan Policy Bridge document shows the property as X2, existing commercial center. This designation applies to the existing suburban commercial centers with the intent to allow these uses to continue, but allow the areas to evolve into a more compact pedestrian-oriented mixed-use center over time. The X2 allows a broad mix of commercial and general service uses. The proposed modular classroom unit is not pedestrian-oriented and doesn't meet this requirement. In 2003, the Board of Commissioners and the applicant for Cureton Town Center agreed upon Cureton Town Center guidelines and Cureton Town Center conditional use permit plan as a condition of approval. In addition of the conditional use permit requirements, the Cureton retail development is regulated by the 2002 Waxhaw UDO that was in place at the time of approval. The proposed major amendment for a 7,872 square foot modular classroom building is not compliant with the conditional approved plan and guidelines, nor the 2002 UDO, and staff recommends denial. Here's just a quick run-through of the ways it was in keeping and not in keeping. 2003 Cureton Town Center conditional use permit plan, it didn't have required street access or frontage, was not a minimum 50% brick. Approved Cureton design guidelines, did not meet the intent of the guidelines, not parallel to sidewalk as required. HVAC units were not screened, facade and roof not broken down into smaller elements, and the proposed roof material not specified. 2002 UDO, a condition is needed to ensure that the site meets the supplemental requirement that speakers be at least 50 feet from a residential property, and that the modular classroom have a 20-foot easement from a public street for emergency vehicles. From the future land use plan, the proposed modular classroom unit is not pedestrian-oriented and does not meet the intent of X2 existing commercial center. Other consideration, Union County Fire Marshal approval is not obtained, and so on. And there's extensive list of conditions for your consideration that is included in the staff report, and it contains examples of conditions for additional time for the modular on the site, as well as additional structures for the school on the site. At the planning board meeting, there was a motion for an unfavorable recommendation, 4-2. The rationale for the dissenting votes were that it was a temporary facility and a guarantee could be secured that the structure would be moved in the allotted time, and also that appropriate conditions could be accommodated. There was a motion to adopt staff's unfavorable recommendation for the reasonable and consistency statement. And as I said at the beginning of the presentation, that this presentation and staff report was based on the original submittal. There was a revised submittal on September 29th, and this has not been reviewed by staff. This was out of the process. Typically, we don't have a plan submitted between the planning board and town board public hearing. So here are the 4 findings of fact, and I think Chaplin went over those at the beginning. So your motion would be approval, or approval with conditions, or denial. And then there's a new statement of reasonableness and consistency that the state statutes mandated go into effect October 1st. So you see at the 3rd bullet point, the major conditional use permit amendment request amends the comprehensive plan, and a change in conditions results in the request meeting the development needs of the community, and then it is up to the Board of Commissioners, if they choose that option, to explain the change in conditions. And that's all I had.
Okay, so before we bring up the applicant, let's at least get initial questions, and I'm going to do this, go around the table. Commissioner Fitzgerald, do you have questions for the zoning administrator?
Could I have a little bit more clarity on the Waxhaw Fire Marshal? What were the comments that they made?
It was that, it was about the sprinklers in the building,
Yeah.
and,
It was something about 50 feet from the building. Is there a fire hydrant 50 feet within that, where that building's going to be placed? Or
fire apparatus access shall be within 150 feet of all exterior walls of a non-sprinkled building.
is there a fire hydrant within 150 feet of that building? Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Burrow?
Sure. Thank you. Yes, that's 2 sets of questions. When do you expect the fire marshal to have his comments back? Any idea?
I don't.
You don't?
I haven't had contact with them.
How about the time for I know that you have to put this in line with other things, but any idea when you think the staff would have time to review this and come back with perhaps a different set of, different presentation?
I think that by the next Board of Commissioners meeting, we could accommodate it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Warner, your questions?
I guess, in reading through this, my biggest question is, if we were to approve this, could they build this across the street in the parking lot or one of those open lots over at the Harris Teeter? I mean,
They could apply for it, and then I guess it might set a precedent.
okay, that's what I wanted to hear, setting a precedent, okay. I'm really confused, where is the threshold between minor and major on this?
Yeah, so a substantive change in the plan is considered a major amendment, and since this is 2 principal uses on the site, and there's only supposed to be 1, this kicked into a major.
Okay, well, you gave them a minor to let them have a school in there last year or whatever, but this is different.
Yeah, this adds another building, so it's 2 principal structures now, whereas 1, it was 2 principal uses, but 1 was housed inside of the other, and it's common for a school to be located inside of a church building.
Okay, just that they exceed the 50 people, students or whatever, which
The-
nothing would apply if they had 50 or less,
Um,
from what I read.
can you ask that?
Yeah, I mean, as I read the conditional use, if if it had 50 or less students in a school, then it's permitted under the conditional use. But they're well over 50 students, so they had to give a minor conditional last year change. But this year, this is, I've answered my own question. Okay. I think that's it for now. I'll probably have something a little later.
Commissioner Burns.
Going back to the UDO in 2002, are all of the buildings that are currently in the process or that have been built in the infill, have they all been in line with the UDO of 2002?
To the best of my knowledge at this time.
Thank you.
Pro Tem Hunt.
So, okay, so, first thing, is the fire marshal here for Waxhaw, I believe, somewhere? She left, okay. So Commissioner Fitzgerald, there we go. Can I ask her to step up?
She asked to be sworn in to be, if you want to ask her a question. So, would you like to come
Yes,
up
please.
and be sworn in? Okay, come back to order, please. Mayor Pro Tem Hunt.
I'm sorry, can I get your name?
Ashley Riggins?
Good evening. So, obviously, you're the fire marshal for the town.
Yes.
Commissioner Fitzgerald had asked about the 150 and referring to a hydrant. I don't believe that's what your comment was in reference to.
No, the comment's in reference to the hose pool. It's 150 feet to all exterior walls of a non-sprinklered building.
Yes, ma'am. So, wherever the setup would be, the fire truck parks, you've got to reach within 150 feet,
Correct,
and that's a stretch to the hose.
correct.
Okay, is there any provision, or would you suggest an access down one side, paved access,
They can do that as long as it meets the criteria for the access road.
strong enough to support the weight of a fire truck,
Right,
obviously?
and
get
an
the
all-weather
truck there.
driving surface.
Okay, so it's a safety concern, not necessarily on the hydrant issue, but the stretch of the hose. Typically, 150-foot lay is what's on a fire truck. Of course, this is what I do for a living, so kind of got this. But,
That's why I asked the
Right.
question. I figured it was 150 foot from the hydrant, and that's where they have to get the source of the water to put out a fire.
right, but it comes from the fire truck, so the access point needs to be there, one way or the other. But, all right. So thank you. That's all I have for her, but I have some more.
Thank you.
So, back to Lisa.
Hang on, so I'll let her come up.
And I know Commissioner Warner addressed this, and I don't know if I really got the answer that I heard. So how does the minor amendment that was approved by the town to allow for the church and the school change the requested, or excuse me, for the finding of fact A, that the use requested is among the listed as eligible conditional use in the district? By allowing them to have the school there, does that then grant or grandfather now make it an eligible conditional use for that district?
So a school is allowed with a conditional use permit in the
Okay.
C3 zoning district.
Mhm.
So the church went in and it was able to meet the design guidelines. It's pedestrian oriented. The school came in and they were going to occupy the existing church building. So that's why that was allowed as a minor at that time. And now they're placing another building on the site, so it gives you two principal uses on the site,
Okay,
or principal buildings, I should say.
okay. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
So, just have one quick question. Did you evaluate this as a permanent structure or temporary structure? And does it matter in the issuance of a conditional use here?
It doesn't matter in this instance, according to the UDO, because the only temporary uses that are allowed are a temporary construction trailer, and I think a carnival or a tent event or something for 1 month out of the calendar year.
So if we were to approve, that would be a condition that we would have to add to the situation, that it's a temporary structure,
And
if we so choose.
They did note that as a condition that they offered up on the plan.
Okay.
To end at the end of, I believe, July 2018. So it's one of your optional conditions to, allow that to extend so that they can locate a new site.
Okay. Thank you. Chaplain?
Just a little housekeeping. Would you like, this is just getting everything into evidence because we're going back to this quasi-judicial. You have a staff presentation that you presented. Would you like to enter that into evidence?
Yes, I'd like to enter the staff presentation and staff report into evidence.
Is that accepted by the board?
Yes.
Yes.
And would you like to submit your staff report dated October 10th, 2017, the conditional use permit application, and there were, I think, all the exhibits are listed on that staff report. But would you like to enter that with the exhibits and evidence as well?
Yes, I would like to enter that.
Accepted?
Accepted. So since we have that in evidence, Commissioner Fitzgerald has an additional question.
I just want to make sure that all the property owners at the Puritan Town Center were contacted out of this conditional use permit possibility in this hearing tonight, were they?
Yes. The ones that were listed on the GIS Union County system.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to, I had a hunch.
It's usually the way this works. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you. My name is Ty Schaefer. I'm a lawyer with Robinson, Bradshaw, and Hinson. My partner, John Carmichael, is here with me tonight. We have a couple of folks who are going to provide some testimony. We are counsel for both the church and the school. The request tonight, which you've already heard, is for a major amendment to the conditional use permit for Puritan Town Center. And I want to be sure that we're clear about what the request is so that we're not miscommunicating about this. The request is to amend the conditional use permit's architectural and design standards. And it's a request to amend them on an interim basis, and it's a request to amend them for one parcel, the church parcel. So to be more specific, the applicant and the property owner are asking that the plan and the design standards be amended to allow the use of this modular classroom building on the site. That building will serve the existing approved use, which is a school use for the site. And they're requesting that that be allowed for a period ending no later than July 31st, 2019. So there is we had mentioned a condition of an end date. This is an interim use. That's the nature of the request, and we can talk more about that as the evening goes on. As Ms. McCarter noted, there is not a request for an increase in the number of children enrolled at the school. It is simply to allow the school on an interim basis to use this building on the site according to a plan that we're going to review with you all tonight. Now, there have been changes that we've made. The 18 conditions that were listed in the staff analysis, we've been able to incorporate all of those changes except for the changes that relate specifically to the architectural standards. And that's because that's why we're here tonight, is to request that amendment to the design standards to allow this use. There's been discussion already about the lawsuit. Mr. Spencer noted this. I do want to be clear from the start, we think that has no bearing at all on what happens tonight. So this is a very defined inquiry that the board has to take. There's a set procedure for it. And if we present evidence that satisfy the four findings of fact, then the law is pretty clear that you have to grant the request for the amendment. We're
Just to
gonna-
be clear, we don't think that either.
Perfect.
But we had to state it for the record.
And I just want to put that in the record. There will be a little bit of tedium tonight, and I apologize in advance. This is quasi-judicial. We need to create a record. We'll have witnesses that'll provide testimony. We'll feel formal, but we do need to create that record for purposes of the hearing for our benefit. and for the board's benefit as well. I want to really briefly preview the showing that the applicant is going to make tonight at this hearing. We respectfully believe that we are going to satisfy all four findings of fact. The first, which you've already heard, is that the use requested is among those listed as an eligible conditional use in the district in which the property is located or to be located. We want to be clear again, the use at issue here is an elementary school. That is the use that is approved for this site already. There should be no dispute that the use requested is an eligible conditional use in the C3 zoning district. I'm not being flippant when I say that. We can point to things like the fact that the applicant and the property owner already have an approved conditional use permit that allows them to put this use on the site. And the ordinance explicitly permits a school use on a site that's zoned C3. We think there's been some miscommunication on our part, perhaps with staff throughout this process that we're going to clear up tonight. But the building that's proposed is not a request for a second use. It's a request for another structure on the site that will house the principal use on the site, the use that's already approved for the property. And from the applicant's perspective, that's the nature of this request, a request for a new structure to house the use that were already permitted if we meet the conditions in the ordinance to put to use on the site. We think the 2002 UDO is also clear that it allows the board to reach the decision to approve this request in a number of ways. First, we just want to note, just because the applicant proposes to use the modular classrooms only until July 31st, 2019, we don't think that necessarily means that the building is temporary, like a tent or a canopy. The only thing that's temporary about this is the applicant's plan and their commitment to stop using the building at a certain site. In that respect, it's no different than the church building, which they're committed to using for their school for only a certain limited time period as part of their future strategic plan for the school. We think that the definitions in the UDO make it clear that this is a building, capital B building, in your definitions. It's a capital S structure, as your ordinance defines it, and both of those are allowed on this site. We think that what we're requesting is consistent with what the 2002 UDO permits the applicant to do. If the board disagrees with that for some reason, we would argue in the alternative that if you think this is a capital T temporary building, as the UDO defines it, we think the ordinance allows for a temporary building in the C3 zoning district as a use allowed by right, provided the property owner meets the supplemental requirements that are set out in 11.3.65 of the UDO, and that relates only to setback, how far you must set back the structure from the adjacent property line. So we'll go through all this more in detail. I'm just want to set on an agenda so you know where we're going to be headed throughout this portion of the hearing. The second finding of fact is that the conditional use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if it's located where proposed and developed according to the plan proposed that we're going to review with you tonight. We think the evidence you're going to hear is going to show clearly that this building, as implemented in connection with this use, is not going to materially endanger the public health or materially endanger public safety, and we'll discuss that in more detail. The third finding is that the conditional use meets all required conditions and specifications. We're going to present testimony and evidence to show you that we believe we satisfy that requirement as well. And then finally, the fourth finding is the harmony requirement that Mr. Spencer noted, that the location and the character of the conditional use, if developed according to the plan as proposed, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located and in general conformity with the plan of development in Waxhaw and its environs. Again, we think there's no dispute that a school use is deemed by ordinance in Waxhaw to be in harmony because it's something you specifically allow in the C3 zoning district that's contemplated by your ordinance, your statute, in effect. But we'll present some more testimony that we think is directly relevant to that finding to show that we satisfy that standard as well. I don't want to belabor this point, but I do think it's worth noting, and Mr. Spencer alluded to this, if the applicant, us, if we present you material, competent, substantial, and material evidence that these four standards have been met, and no one introduces any evidence that refutes that showing tonight at the hearing, then North Carolina law is clear that the board has to approve the request for the amendment. This is not a discretionary matter like your legislative zoning decisions. This is a different beast altogether. So with all that in mind, unless you have any questions at the start, we'll go ahead and launch to respect your time. I'd like to ask Ms. McCarter to come up, to just ask you a couple of questions to start. And you have to bear with us, I'm pretending to be a real lawyer. We'll number exhibits, hand this out, and do this formally. We have an aerial here. And if you like, maybe we can just introduce the exhibits at the end. That's more efficient, isn't it? We can move out here. Can you just confirm, I know you had an aerial in your presentation, I believe this is a more up-to-date aerial. Can you confirm that this is an aerial of the site? Maybe we can flip it so we know exactly what we're...
Yes,
Yeah,
that is the site.
And so this is the church building, correct?
Correct.
In the front, okay. And I also just want to establish for the record what the zoning of the property and the surrounding properties are so that we have that. Can you confirm that this is a copy of the Town of Waxhaw zoning map?
Yes.
Yes. And can you show the board where the property is located? If you don't mind, sorry to ask you this. This is the site. It's this way. Yeah, can you run through the board what the surrounding zoning designations are for the
Yes,
parcels that it
and I already did in my presentation, so let me go back to that. Do you have the clicker?
It's right here. Thanks.
All right, the property is located on the north side of Kensington Drive between Fifth Third Bank and the Cureton Residential Subdivision. The property is zoned CUC3, conditional use general commercial, because it was approved by a conditional use permit, and is approximately 10.381 acres in size. To the north, a single-family residential dwelling, zone Union County R40, single-family residential. To the south, the existing parking lot and retail building for Cureton Town Center, zone CUC3. To the east, Fifth Third Bank and Cureton Town Center, zone CUC3, and property to the east, zoned R1, single-family residential. To the west, Cureton Residential Subdivision, zone CUR3PRD, conditional use, single-family residential, planned unit development.
Now, I do have one exhibit that I'd like you to go ahead and identify for us so we can put this in the record, and I'll go ahead and we can pass copies out to members of the board as well. This document that I handed you, can you confirm that this is the table of uses from the 2002 UDO?
To the best of my knowledge, without having another copy to compare it to, this is a copy of the 2002 UDO.
And I'll represent to you that my understanding is that's what it is. Can you confirm that a school is an eligible use, conditional use in the C3 zoning district according to that table of uses?
Yes.
And you already introduced the staff analysis into evidence, so we can rely on that. Just a couple of questions quickly about that. Did you reviewed the initial plan to prepare the staff analysis, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you did that both in September and October for instances?
For the sake of those that are watching on live, could you speak into, both of you speak into the microphones, please?
Sorry, I didn't know we had a stream audience. Were you responsible for preparing the staff analysis in September and also the staff analysis you presented tonight?
Yes, I was.
And I won't go back over the particular zoning change, or the amendments to the conditional use permit, but your understanding is that the facts you recount in that analysis are correct, the timeline for amendments to the permit?
From the history that I found, yes.
Thanks. One other question on that. There were 18 conditions that were recommended by planning staff in the September staff analysis. There also were 18 in the October 10th staff analysis. Can you confirm that nothing changed in those conditions between the two reports?
Both sets of conditions were based on the original submittal and not the one that was recently submitted that was revised, so they stayed the same.
Thank you very much. to identify this document as well. Is this the traffic analysis that Kimley Horn prepared in September in connection with the review of the amendment for increase in enrollment for the school?
I would have to look back because there were several iterations because there was different requests of amount of enrollment and different things that they were asking for at the time because they had a minor amendment approved for 425 within the existing church building. And then there was also a request for 485 students. And then there was another request for the modular with 485 and one for 425. So there was a lot of iterations, and I don't know the exact date of it, so I'm not willing to say.
Well, perhaps we can look then in the second paragraph of this document. I think it states, based on the input from the applicant, the request is for a total of 425 students. Am I reading that correctly?
Can I ask a question? Is the document that you passed out the same one that was already admitted into evidence from the staff package?
That would be a good way to short-circuit this. I
that's
believe
what I'm
it might be, and I think we also could point to the map that's attached to the back of this document that shows the queuing recommendations, which I believe is the same map.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the one in my staff report is the correct Kimley Horn document.
Thank you very much for that. And I just want to confirm, Kimley Horn concluded that there was adequate queue storage on this site to accommodate expected queues of cars for pickup. Is that correct? And for drop-off?
Yes, if it lined up the way that they were proposing, and they'd also had some further recommendations for safety.
And we'll address those in some more detail later as well. I'd like to introduce one more document, and I do so for reasons unrelated to the ongoing dispute between the town and the school, but I do think it's relevant to matters we'll discuss later on. But can you identify this? Is this section 9.22 of the current Town of Waxhaw UDO?
Yes.
And that provision allows for Union County Public Schools to utilize mobile classrooms, provided they follow a certain procedure. Is that correct?
This is something that Union County Public Schools work with all the local municipalities, and I believe it took about a year and a half in working with them to set about standards specifically for Union County Public Schools.
Okay. And so just to confirm, use of modular classrooms on Union County Public School sites is something that's specifically contemplated by this statute. Is that correct?
Yes, so mobile classrooms would only apply to Union County Public Schools.
Is it your understanding as zoning administrator that mobile classroom units are used on Union County Public School sites throughout the county?
Yes.
And how about in the town of Waxhaw? Are there schools in the town of Waxhaw where modular classroom units are being used?
I don't know.
Okay. Maybe South Providence?
Yes.
Yeah. We have another witness, so we can, if you're not,
I'm prepared to answer
if you're not
questions
prepared.
about this. I didn't.
No, that's entirely fair. I think that's all we have. We may ask you to come back up if we need other questions. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that. We'd now like to ask Dr. Pam Long to come up and give some testimony to you all as well. Can you state your name and address, please?
Sure. Dr. Pamela Long, and I'm head of school at Union Day School.
And can you just briefly describe for the board your job responsibilities, what you do in the role as head of school? Everything is probably not an acceptable answer.
Probably not. Ultimately, my job duty is to ensure the socio-mental, emotional well-being, along with the physical safety of these 419 students, along with ensuring that they receive the best educational opportunity provided to them. And with that means overseeing an incredible faculty and staff who are really developing our lifelong learners and our successful community members in this community. And so it goes down to whether it's curriculum, professional development, tearing, cleaning up a tear off of a child who's, sad, getting hugs from kids every day. It's a great job, and yes, quite honestly, it's everything.
Are you familiar with the amendment of the conditional use permit earlier this year to request enrollment increase to 425 students at the school?
Yes.
What is the current enrollment at Union Day School?
We're currently at 419 students.
Okay. And do you know how many of those students live in the town of Waxhaw?
Yes, 355, so 85% of our student body are Waxhaw residents.
Are you familiar with the school and the church's request to place a modular classroom building on this site?
Yes.
And can you confirm the school's not proposing any increase in enrollment in connection with this, correct?
Correct, no increase in enrollment.
You're also familiar with drop-off and pickup on the site, correct?
Yes, I live that.
Have you ever seen traffic queuing onto Kensington during either drop-off or pickup?
No, we work very hard to make sure that Kensington does not have any traffic queuing whatsoever.
Ms. McCarter mentioned that Kimberly Horn had some recommendations related to safety in connection with traffic flow on the site. How does the revised plan for this site incorporate provisions for the safety of students walking back and forth from the church to the modular classroom building?
Sure. The only location that we have with active cars is really on the back end of the property. And we have a pedestrian walkway that goes to the back of the property, and our students are using it all the time. They use the back parking lot, and it's protected so that students are safe. We have PE, we have recess back there, so it does not change the safety guidelines whatsoever to walk back to a modular as the kids are going back to the picnic tables as well. And when it comes to drop-off, well, actually when we have pick up in the afternoons, students will be leaving the modulars around 3:15 because cars are not on the property yet. They will walk down into the main building, and we will have one central location that will not change. So all students will remain getting picked up from main Forest Hills Church.
I had mentioned a few seconds ago use of modular classrooms at Union County Public Schools throughout the town. Are you familiar with any schools in the town of Waxhaw that use modular
Oh, yes,
classrooms?
yes.
Do you know which?
Kensington, Newtown, I pass, as far as elementaries, yes.
I just want to put this on the record. It's safe to say as a school and in your role, your primary concern is for the safety of your students, correct?
Definitely.
And you would never take any steps you believe would endanger the health or safety of your students?
Never.
Is it your belief that the proposed modular classroom buildings are adequately safe for use by your students?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I noted the request here is for an amendment on an interim basis. Can you confirm that the school is committed to removing the modular classrooms from this site no later than July 31st of 2019?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
you.
I appreciate it.
Can I ask a clarification question? So you said attendance would not exceed what's current, 425, is that through
Yes.
2019?
2019, yes, that I know of, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I believe they would have to request an additional.
Yeah, we'd have to
variance
request.
to do that. Thanks very much. All right. Ask Will Berkeley to come up and speak to the board as well. You can use both mics. Can you state your name and address, please?
Yeah, Will Berkeley, 3906 East Sire Court in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay. And who's your employer? What are your, what's your profession?
I'm a licensed general contractor.
Okay, great. Which professional qualifications do you have?
A general contractor.
General contractor license, great. Can you just briefly give the board a background of your role in this process and familiarity with this site?
Yeah, my role in this process is to represent Forest Hills' interests. So I kind of steward this process to ensure that all of the requirements get met, the plans and the processes that are required by the town are met, and just kind of wrangle the troops to get all the information in the right place at the right time.
And your involvement with this site stretches back to time period at which building the church on this site was contemplated,
Correct. I
correct?
oversaw the process of the church building.
And is your understanding that a church on this site was something that was contemplated by the original 2003 conditional use permit?
I believe so, yes.
Let me ask that question again. Did you need to seek an amendment to that conditional use permit to build a church on this
I believe we
site?
went through a change process, but I'm not sure of that.
Okay. I'd like to show you a document here and ask you to identify this.
That's the certificate of occupancy of the building on the site there. Occupancy of assembly and educational use.
Okay, so just confirm the certificate of occupancy that was issued it was issued for for educational use on this site, correct?
That's correct. The plans were designed with educational use in mind and reviewed by the Department of Insurance, and then at the end, we received a certificate of occupancy for both uses.
Okay, thanks. It'll take me a moment to get the next document together, if that's okay.
You're doing well.
Put this up here in case you need to make reference to it, but I think, largely we'll want to refer to the board. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll put this up here in case you want to make reference to it, but I think we'll largely have you walk through this on the board
Okay.
so that the commissioners can see this. Go ahead and pass this out. Thanks. Okay, can you identify the document that we've just handed out and also what's on this board?
Yeah, these are the civil construction plans for the church as revised for the modular building.
Will you speak into the microphone?
These are the civil plans of the site as revised with the proposed use of the modular building.
And this packet of plans was prepared and finalized after the initial staff analysis on September 18th.
That is correct. We took the staff analysis and revised it according to their comments as best as possible.
Can you, what was your role in preparing these plans?
Really just managing the process and having the civil engineer ensure that all of these staff comments were addressed and included in this document and then resubmitted to the town.
Okay. And I guess maybe we can attach this and you can take this with you perhaps. Do you mind just walking the board through what we have here on this site plan and explain the location of the building and some other changes that have been incorporated?
You're doing a great job, by the way. This is the building here. This is the proposed location of the modular unit. We've got a proposed easement for the fire access and a 12-inch thick gravel fire access next to the modular unit so that the fire truck can pull directly up to the building there. You see these arrows here show our traffic pattern, circulation pattern. This area back in the back is currently being used as a play field, so the kids and then our children's ministry with the church use that area to play in. Any other questions?
I guess maybe also you could explain to them a little bit about the modular classroom building that's being proposed for the site, also the underpinnings, water and sewer, and other features.
During the construction process of this building, we assumed that at some point in time there would be a chance that we would put some type of structure back here in the back property. So we had water and sewer line run from the front of the property back here. So there's already existing water and sewer at the rear of the property that's been reviewed and inspected. Union Power ran a line all the way around the edge of the parking lot. We granted them an easement. They ran that line so that they could connect to future development and backfeed power loop if there was ever a power outage. And we'll be able to tie directly onto that to connect to the modular unit. The modular unit, I think you guys saw in the pictures, it looks pretty much like any other modular unit that you would see at any school. It would be installed on foundation piers and then have an underpinning to cover up the bottom of the modular unit. Again, all the utilities are permanent fixtures. We don't have any holding tanks for water or anything like that on site.
And you'll need to go through a permitting process, right, eventually, independent of this
That's
amendment
correct.
process for that
If this
building.
process is approved, our next step would be to submit a formal application to the town to review the site plan and the building structure that we would be putting there.
Can you say a bit about visibility of this unit from Kensington?
Correct.
Where it's located on the site?
It's pretty far from Kensington. It's at the very back corner of our property, with the exception of the setbacks. You can see it from a few areas as you drive by in Kensington, but you really have to strain pretty hard to see that part of the property, and you should probably be paying attention to the road. But you can see it. If you sat on the patio at Moe's, you might be able to look across the street and see it.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, so just could you, for the sake of, because it's hard to read on this, just read into the record. It's sealed 2016, but the revisions are off to the side as to what revisions you made in 2017.
That's great.
So we
Thank
have
you.
that.
That's correct. Most of these revisions, I believe, are all bubbled and circled here. So if you see all the items that are bubbled on that drawing, those items have been revised for this part of the
And
process.
can you just confirm the dates of the revised plans as well?
Matt, what day did you seal these? Revision. Sorry.
Looks like they occurred from July through
9/28.
the end of September.
9/28/2017 was the latest date. Sorry, the last amendment was 9/12 to it, correct?
Thank you, Will.
No problem.
Did you review the list of considerations that were outlined in the staff analysis upon their review of the initial plan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And can you summarize briefly for the boards the efforts the church and the school have taken to respond to the safety considerations that were identified?
Absolutely. The safety considerations, the main safety considerations that come to mind are the easement and access for fire truck. And we have shown a 20-foot easement all the way around, and then we've got this gravel driveway that shows a 12-inch thick gravel fire access road that comes all the way down the side of the building so that a fire truck could pull up all the way down the side of the building. The other is that we have said that we would provide a crosswalk attendant to walk the students across the parking lot on the marked crosswalk across the property. Can't think of any others.
And just to confirm, that was one of the two options that Kimley Horn had recommended in their traffic study, correct?
That is correct.
And we heard testimony earlier from the fire marshal. Is it correct to say that the applicant is going to meet whatever requirements a fire marshal says are necessary? for this
Absolutely.
plan? Okay, absolutely. Thank you. There were additional comments on the staff analysis regarding architectural considerations, and it might be best for us to make reference to that report while you're doing this. But I'd like you to just really briefly, if you can, explain for the board changes that the church and the school have made to the plan to respond to specific architectural considerations.
Some of the architectural considerations are a challenge with a modular unit. It's a modular unit, so you don't see modular units with a brick veneer on them. Since we are going to have it here for a temporary period of time, we do recognize that there's some screening that would be appropriate. We would propose to screen the HVAC units on the side of the building. We are also saying that we're willing to paint it a color that might be complementary of the surroundings so that it is a little less visible and might blend in a little bit more. From the site plan there were erosion and sediment control conditions for consideration. There are a few safety considerations as it relates to the site. I believe we were able to address all of them. However, Lisa to review them again to ensure that they are changed, but I believe we were able to address everything. Matt might be able to speak into that a little bit better than I can. We definitely have made our best effort and are sure that we can provide a safe access, safe environment for the children with that modular unit.
Just we want to confirm a couple of these so that we get them in the record. So we've got that. So one of those architectural conditions related to duration, and again, the church, along with the school, is also committing to remove the classroom no later than July 31st of 2019, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And the consideration regarding scope of the request, this is a request for a single modular building, not for additional modular classrooms, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And there was a request for a note addressing after-school program times and location for after-school program events. Has that been done in the note revisions?
We don't have additional after-school program occurring in that modular unit that I'm aware of, and so there is none to address.
And one of the ordinance requirements that Ms. McCarter noted is that outdoor speakers at a school would be at least 50 feet from property lines. Is that a condition that's been incorporated into the revised plan?
Actually, no, we have made a comment that we will not be having an outdoor speaker. We use a different intercom communication system that does not require that speaker.
So you won't have any outdoor speakers
That's
within
correct.
50 feet of residential properties?
That's correct.
And you've also added information on the plan that specifies the square footage and the height of the classroom, correct?
Yes, that was added.
Numbers 14 through 18 on the architectural considerations, you mentioned some of these that deal with roof material, building material, roof elements. It's correct that the request for the amendment to the conditional use permit is because this building does not and cannot meet those
That's
guidelines,
correct. That's exactly why we're here.
Okay, great. Are you proposing to add any lighting to the site other than what's already on the site?
No, there will not be any new lighting that needs to be added.
Okay. That's all I have unless the board has any questions for Mr. Berkeley.
I have a question.
Hang on a second. Commissioner Fitzgerald, you have questions? Commissioner Burrow.
Just one thing I'd like you to clear up for me. You were talking about permanent structures versus temporary structures, and it seems to me you were asking that we consider these as more or less permanent structures according to the code. Is that correct?
Well, I think that's right. The definition of building or structure under the code, this would fall within those, and those are not contemplated in the ordinance to be temporary
So
structures.
if it were, in my mind, a permanent structure, though, I would be looking for the original conditions to apply. So I'm going to keep that in mind as we go forward.
Okay, and we'll discuss that in some more, and we're happy to discuss that.
Commissioner Warner.
Just to reiterate, to make it simple, I mean, what you're really saying is that, you know, I read through this, all those things, and you didn't meet this, you didn't meet that the last couple of days. And you're saying that, okay, we'll meet all the safety regulations. You're willing to agree to that, whatever the fire marshal, police chief, whatever says. That's
Absolutely. We want to make the best effort to do everything that we can to ensure those safety regulations are met.
Okay, now then it just comes down to the, you know, I saw you gave us a set of plans at the meeting. I've never seen these before that show this driveway beside the building, which,
We submitted those a couple of weeks ago to the town of Waxhaw.
okay, we're slow.
I requested a digital copy, and we did not receive that, so I wasn't able to give it to you prior to the meeting.
Okay, so we couldn't reproduce it, that's the bottom line. Okay, now, so architecturally, I mean, you're asking the people that signed on over to Harris Teeter and everybody else to let somebody not abide by the architectural rules. But then you're willing to say it's only until a year and a half, basically, because you're not going to be in there before December.
That's correct.
And then you're going to agree that the building will be removed completely at that day, no extensions.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
Commissioner Burns. Mayor Pro Tem Hunt.
So my concerns are kind of in line with Commissioner Burrows. You mentioned capital S structure, capital B building, and you went on to temporary. So which one are you asking for?
I think the board can make the decision under either. I think that either of those alternative explanations under the ordinance would apply to this site. And in the closing, I'll discuss that some more.
So the permanent capital S, capital B, coming along with the word permanent, is this purchased? Is the unit a leased unit? Is it mobile to move, or does the school own this unit, or?
What is the,
My understanding is that it is a leased unit and can be moved.
But is that material to the discussion? No, okay. Okay, continue.
To me, I would think it would be material for a permanent structure versus, again, if it's a permanent structure, along with Commissioner Burrell's thinking, there are already design standards for permanent structures to be built in the CUP.
I
Which
think
we're
what they're
requesting
at-
an amendment.
I think the discussion really is that because of the size, it's considered a permanent structure. They're willing to offer up a condition that says the structure will be removed no later than July 31st, 2019, regardless of how we define it as permanent or temporary.
It's a permanent
Correct?
building that we're going to use temporarily.
Correct.
I mean, there are modular units at educational facilities that are used on a semi-permanent basis. I mean, in my high school in Charlotte, the units were there for 20 years, but it doesn't change but we are saying that this building structure will only be used on an interim basis, so it would be temporary in that nature.
Okay.
They have the possibility to be utilized on a permanent or semi-permanent basis. That is not the intent or the commitment.
Okay, and then the condition
No
that,
other condition.
right, for the,
That we could consider. So,
all right.
correct? I mean, that's, and that's a condition you offer?
Yes,
that?
sir.
Yeah, correct, okay. You have a follow-up?
I do. There have been an awful lot of things that you have done since your last review. I would like to make sure that all the things that you proffered here this evening that will be on YouTube, we have the chance, or our zoning administrator has the chance, to make sure that they are reduced to writing.
They are in the plans we've
But
submitted.
I want her to have the, everybody says
Absolutely.
things, that's great.
Absolutely.
But as far as this goes, it has to be reduced to writing, and she has to be satisfied and be able to come back to us and say, everything they promised they would do is on the plans, and Chaplain Spencer has had a chance to look at it and give me that give us all as a board the confidence that it's done.
That's absolutely
This is a
fair.
good thing. Okay?
And just to clarify, I think, Will, you stated, you've submitted these, and you would like Lisa to review them, just to
That is
confirm
correct.
that her interpretation is the same as yours, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
You said you
Absolutely.
had
I have
more?
a couple more, yes.
Okay.
And just for also clarity, the school is not going to move entirely into this unit.
No, they are not. They're not going to move entirely into this unit. They'll still use the existing space inside the building, and then they'll use some space in this modular space. It just allows the students to have a better learning environment, and that doesn't have them crammed on top of each other. It's a pretty tight squeeze where they are right now, and, we're just trying to ensure that they have the best learning environment possible.
You're going to have 425 students that the school will determine where best to put them for optimum learning, correct?
That's correct. I mean, I think there are some safety regulations that we have to follow, no more than so many students. We are currently in line with that, but we would like to even have a little more space.
And my final thing with the finding of facts, B, that the conditional use will not materially endanger the public health or safety. What I would look at for that is we have a process, there's a Union County Fire Marshal's report that's still out.
The Union County Fire Marshal had emailed us in August, actually, as it related to the minor CUP, but in that email, they said that they did not need to review this process, that they did not need to review this until we got to a construction document. So if this process approved and we are submitting documents for a building permit, then at that point in time, they would review these plans, give us comments, we would revise them if need be, and then hopefully they would approve it, and then they would inspect the building and ensure that we did that before they issued the actual certificate of occupancy. So there are two more opportunities for them to do that in the future, and they've said that that's when they wanted to be involved in the process.
And you'll make that communication that you got back from the fire marshal available to?
Yeah, actually, the email was addressed to Lisa and myself.
All right, very good. All right, so everybody's asked questions. Do we have some follow-up? Commissioner Fitzgerald.
I would like to know what your exit plan is and strategy, what the land will revert back to after this building is not on that site anymore.
Well, the church currently has no plans to put any building other than this modular unit here for the next year and a half. So when we are done, we would remove any evidence that the building ever existed, sidewalks, footings, foundation, all that gets removed, and it will return to the state that it's in now until forever, or until we decide that we need to go through this process again for another structure.
So just as a follow-up to that, Chaplain, as part of the application review, we do not need to be aware of nor know what the church intends to do with the property once the modular is removed on the 31st. That's not a part of this application.
No, the only thing that you could consider part of it would be restoring the property.
The way it is today.
The way it is today, but future use is not before you and would not be relevant for your decision.
I was asking about would it be restored back to its glory of right now?
That's our plan.
Would the gravel fire lane be removed also?
You know, honestly, we have not discussed this in detail. Our discussions so far have been that we intend to remove it completely and restore it to the state that it currently is, so.
We do have one more witness we'd like to call to address.
We thank Will first, though.
Absolutely, you
Great job.
can.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to ask Matt Velkovich to come up briefly. Can you please state your name and address?
Matthew Velkovich, 813 Rains Meadow, Rock Hill, South Carolina.
And can you, what's your current employment and your professional qualifications?
I am self-employed. I have a one-man firm. I'm a licensed civil engineer in North End, South Carolina.
And can you explain your role in this process?
I prepared the construction documents for the site work, so basically everything that is outside of the building in some shape or fashion I had a hand in.
We'll want to refer back to this plan here, and maybe we'll go ahead and take the road show as well. Could you explain the location and the size of the buffers on the site as they relate to the proposed modular building?
Correct. There are two. Thank you. Thank you very much. You're doing. There are two buffers located on the site. They were incorporated into the original site design. They are based on the original 2002 UDO, which is on this northern property line, and then on this northeasterly side, we have a 14-foot wide buffer that is planted with trees and shrubs.
So the buffers on the site, they meet or exceed the requirements in the 2002 UDO, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. How far is the proposed modular building from Kensington?
I would estimate over 500 foot.
Okay. How far is the proposed classroom set back from the adjacent property lines?
The modular classroom has been revised so that it's a minimum of 50 feet. On the northerly side, it's just over 50 feet. On the northeasterly side, it's just over 64 feet.
And that complies with the ordinance requirements, correct?
Correct.
Does the site plan comply with the regulations that apply to this site for detention and water quality?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
The original site was not subject to any detention or post-construction water quality.
Did you review the list of considerations in the staff analysis that was prepared for this application?
Yes, I did.
And there were a few considerations related directly to erosion and sedimentation control. And just really quickly, one of those requests was to add a note that there would be no grading outside of identified limits or disturbance. Is that something that's been incorporated in the revised plan?
Yes, it has been incorporated in the revised plan.
There was a request that that the plan provide a required construction entrance and show that on the plan. Has that been done?
Yes, it has.
Can you point out on the plan where this?
It's actually not on this site plan itself.
You
It's
can point
within.
on the page for the board members.
For the board members, it's sheet C 4.0, which is the erosion control plan.
And just to point out, which note number is the note that provides for no grading outside of identified limits?
It is listed on the right side of the plan, midway down.
And where on the plan is a required construction entrance?
It is located right here, which would be in the same location as the fire access.
There was a request for a note that there be no concrete washouts or similar type use located within 50 feet of a catch basin, drainage inlet, or similar structure. Has that been incorporated into the notes as well?
Correct, there's a note midway down on the right side of the page.
Okay, and there was a request as well to add a note regarding providing a double row silt fence along the north end of the site at the top of the slope. Has that been done?
Correct, the double row silt fence is located along this northern side.
And the final request was for a note that the area would be stabilized upon removal of the modular. Has that been incorporated as well?
Correct, it's also located within the notes on the right side, about midway down.
So it's your understanding that the site plan as revised satisfies the environmental requirements that would apply to this site, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Fitzgerald, any questions? No, sir. Commissioner Burrow?
Not specific to what you just presented.
Speak into the microphone, please.
They're not specific to what you just presented, but I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that all this work has been presented here, and it has yet to be reviewed by our staff. And, go ahead.
I was going to say this later, but I think it might be appropriate at this point. What I would propose, and what I've done before with the town, and specifically with Chaplin, is
Can you state your name, please?
John Carmichael, I'm sorry. We would take what's said tonight, put it in written form, have Chaplin and Lisa review it to make sure everyone's on the same page with respect to the conditions that are being proffered tonight, and then return it to you folks before you make the decision. I mean, that's the way, as I recall, Chaplin, we've done it in the past, and I'm not assuming anything when I say this, but that's the way we like to do it, because I don't want there to be any misunderstanding, because we try to do things that way, and I know the town does, so that's what I would suggest.
So you're suggesting that once all the testimony's done, that we would recess the public hearing to resume in 2 weeks, so you, and give us the information so it can be entered in?
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble when I leave here, but I think the reasonable way to do this is to make sure everybody understands what's being offered.
Yeah.
I think that's the only fair way to do it.
I just want to clarify it
Yes, sir.
in procedural manner.
Yes.
And that is correct. In the way we have done some of these larger quasi-judicials, we have to have a written decision, and it is good to say, if you're going to approve, you set forth the conditions and list them and have them expressly listed, and that way we confirm, we know what we're looking at. We also know that the applicant consents to all the conditions, so they're there in writing. It's okay if you have 2 or 3 conditions, but we're probably at about 14 or 15, and that gets too hard to go by memory.
We're at both conditions and answers that our zoning administrator hasn't had a chance to review yet.
Correct.
So we double. Commissioner Warner?
And I think Mr. Berkeley has interfaced with the town, so maybe he can explain for you all the timeline, just to demonstrate, there certainly has been no effort to spring this on the.
No, that was not even thought of. Will's above, beyond reproach. Will's class act.
I don't have any more questions for Mr. Velkovich. If you all do,
Commissioner Warner?
feel free.
Yeah. I have a concern that, it's there. Oh, well, next year ago and a half, it comes around. I mean, I think if we're going to accept a deadline, we need to put a penalty on it. There needs to be a penalty 30 days after the July 1st date, by the month until it's moved.
If I could respond to that, I think that's fine, and I think that Ms. McCarter would agree that if that is a condition here and we fail to abide by it, that the town would have recourse to all the same code enforcement mechanisms that you currently have for land use violations. So those penalties would apply if we do not comply with the condition that's set on this application.
Lisa, what type of penalties are there for a code violation like this?
What would happen is we would give a warning. There's 2 sets of warnings, and they're both about 10 days. And then after that, we'll start collecting fines. One thing that you could do, that we do for road improvements and things, is bond the removal, so that the town could then remove it.
Okay, so we would be asking for a bond for this, then.
Well, that's an option that you would have. I was just
Not a bad
throwing it
idea.
out there.
I think you gave us an example in the packet as well on that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it was due to, someone said something about bonding, and so.
Right.
That's all I have for now.
Commissioner Burns?
No, I have nothing else to say.
Mayor Pro Tem Hunt?
Good.
We'll take a moment here. We'll go ahead and identify our exhibits so that we get those in the record as well. So our exhibit 1 was the aerial. Go ahead and give these to Mr. Spencer. So we'll identify that, which was identified by Ms. McCarter. This is the.
If we had them identified, I think we just need to get them back.
Yeah, so here's number 2, which is the zoning map.
Are you part of the exhibits that we're going to enter into evidence?
It'll be tough to fit him in the binder
Yeah,
that goes with the record, probably.
Holder.
3 is, I'm sorry, 3 is the table of uses from the UDO. Staff analysis was already admitted, so I think we can call that our Exhibit 5, or however we want to refer to that as well. The Kimley Horn traffic analysis was also part of the record, so I think that's all set. We'll call 922 the current UDO Exhibit 4, please. We will make Exhibit 5 the certificate of occupancy for the site. I'll find that and give it to you afterward. And then we will make Exhibit 6 the revised site plan and elevations, the packet that we handed out as well. And I think that's got everything. Is that consistent with? That's correct, yeah.
These were all presented with testimony, and I don't have an objection if the board doesn't please accept these.
Does anybody have an objection to accepting them as evidence?
No.
Okay,
No.
so we'll accept them.
Here. All right, thank you. Sorry for the interruption. Unfortunately, have to do that. I want to review really briefly the evidence we presented and how we believe it's demonstrated the applicant's carried its burden, that it meets the 4 findings of fact here. I reviewed the standard at the beginning, and I also mentioned that, if we've presented you competent, substantial material evidence that we've met these standards, and this is not a discretionary matter. The amendment has to be granted, and with respect, we think that we've done that tonight, and we think on further analysis of the site plan revisions, you'll see that we've done that as well. The first finding of fact is that the use requested is among those listed as an eligible conditional use in the district in which the subject property is located or is to be located. Again, I think we need to distinguish here the use requested from the structure that's going to house that use. The first finding of fact relates only to the use requested. Here, there's no dispute that a school is an eligible use in the C3 zoning district if we meet the requirements of the ordinance. And in fact, we already have approval, an existing CUP issued for that use for the site. The ordinance permits it. We have certificate of occupancy that shows that this is a use contemplated for the structure. I noted at the open that we think the UDO provides two bases on which the board could decide that this particular structure is allowed. Again, you know, even though the applicant only plans to use this building through July 31st, 2019, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a temporary structure like a tent or a canopy or something along those lines. The 2002 UDO, if you look at the definition, it defines a temporary building, capital term, as a structure of an impermanent nature or which is designed for use for a limited time, like a tent or a canopy. Those are the two specific examples that are given. There's nothing necessarily impermanent about this structure that's proposed for the site. I think we're all familiar with schools throughout the county and you know, our own educational experience where these structures are used for much longer than a tent or a canopy is being used or for which it's designed. Again, the only thing that's temporary here is the applicant's commitment that they are going to stop using this building July 31st, 2019. It's a building proposed to house the same principal use that's housed in the church, and it's really no different in that respect. It's worth noting that the school plans to vacate the church as well, July 31st, 2019. Again, if the board disagrees with that, though, we would argue in the alternative the modular is if you think it's a temporary building, we'd argue in the alternative that the UDO does allow for temporary buildings. If you look at the table of uses in the 2002 UDO, temporary construction trailers / structures is a category of buildings that is allowed provided you meet certain supplemental requirements in the C3 zoning district. It's unclear exactly what that means because they're using terms that are not defined in your ordinance, and I think a reasonable interpretation of that would be that we're talking about two categories of buildings here. One is a temporary construction trailer, and one is a temporary structure. And the only supplemental requirement in the 2002 UDO for that use in the C3 zoning district is that you meet the setback requirements that are required for the structure. And Mr. Velkovich testified that this does meet those setback requirements. So we think that on that table of use, a temporary structure would be allowed for this site. And if we think it's unclear, then we think law in North Carolina is pretty settled that if there's an ambiguity, it needs to be construed in favor of the property owner's right to use their property as they see fit. So we think the board has two options on which it can decide that the UDO does in fact permit in the C3 zoning district this building on the site. The second finding of fact is that the conditional use will not materially endanger the public health or safety if it's located where proposed and if it's developed according to the plan as proposed. Again, we think we've presented to you clear, competent, and convincing evidence that we satisfy the requirements of finding of fact number two. The testimony shows, and we think upon review by planning staff of the revised plans, that we have incorporated all the safety conditions that planning staff proposed, the 20-foot easement, the use of crossing guards, which is what Kimley Horn recommended be done for the site. Mr. Velkovich testified that the plan incorporates the erosion and sedimentation control conditions that planning staff proposed, that the site plan meets all the environmental regulations that are applicable to this site. And Kimley Horn's report from the start has made it clear there are no traffic issues associated with this site. There's adequate queuing on the property for drop-off and pickup. So we think there are no public health or safety concerns, and certainly no health or safety concerns for the students that are going to be in this modular. If that was a risk, you can be assured that the school and the church would not be requesting that you let them put this building on the site. The third finding is that the conditional use meets all required conditions and specifications. Planning staff's report cites 4 separate sources of regulation that staff looked at when reviewing the site plan. The first is the current approved conditional use permit site plan. The second are the approved Curitin design guidelines. The third is the 2002 UDO, which applies to this. And then the fourth, which was in addition to the October 10th staff analysis that wasn't present in the September 18th staff analysis, is compliance with the comprehensive land use plan. As for the Curitin site plan and the Curitin site guidelines, again, that's the entire reason we're here. We're seeking an amendment of those of the site plan, of the design guidelines. There's no dispute this structure would not comply with the roof, the material, the other requirements that are set out in those guidelines. In light of that, because that is the nature of the request, and because your ordinance contemplates an applicant coming before you to make just that kind of request for amendment to design guidelines that are adopted as part of a conditional use permit, we don't think the board can deny our request on the basis that our request for an amendment to those standards doesn't comply with those standards. Your ordinance contemplates that we would come here and we would make this request in precisely that situation, and if we meet the 4 findings of fact, then you issue the permit. Again, for the reasons we just discussed, and we can come back to this, we think that the building does comply with the UDO. We think there are 2 different ways that you could reach that conclusion. We think both are equally viable, but we think that the use does comply with that regulation. Again, we presented testimony tonight telling you that we comply with all the other regulations and conditions that would apply to the site, and we've incorporated all the safety and environmental control conditions that have been requested of us to make sure that we do that. One final point on this, the addition that was made about compliance with the comprehensive land use plan. Respectfully, we would disagree that this does not comply with that use. The provision of the comprehensive land use plan that staff points to provides that for an existing commercial center like this, number one, the existing uses will be continued, which is what we have here, the same use on the site. We're seeking to continue that. But, and I'll quote, will allow the area to evolve into more compact, pedestrian-oriented, mixed-use centers over time if and when redevelopment occurs. We would suggest to you there's nothing in the applicant's plan for this site which is a request for an interim change to the design guidelines would in any way prevent development of this area into a more compact pedestrian-oriented mix in the future, which is what this is about. It's speculation, it's aspirational, and this certainly is no roadblock to that. So we would suggest that there's not a compliance issue with your comprehensive land use plan, in particular because this will end July 31st, 2019. That would be the most foundational reason. But the second is that, this use does not in any way prohibit the aspiration to develop this area in a way that is more compact and pedestrian-friendly in the future. So we think we've met, that we've demonstrated through clear, competent, and convincing material evidence that finding of fact 3 we've satisfied as well. The final finding is the harmony finding, that the location and character of the conditional use, if developed according to the plan as proposed, will be in harmony with the area in which it is to be located, and in general conformity with the plan of development of Waxhaw and its environs. Again, we don't think there's any dispute that a school use is deemed by your ordinance to be in harmony here because it's something you specifically allow in the C3 zoning district. The North Carolina cases on this question speak to a presumption of harmony if the use in question is one that is permitted by ordinance in the district. So if you are requesting a use that the ordinance says you can put on X site, then the case law says that is a presumption that that use is in harmony with the area. And we think that we're entitled to that presumption here. But we also think beyond that, that the modular building is in harmony with the area for a lot of other reasons. First, and I'll point to 9.22, and I will do so in a way that makes no statement at all about whether we think it applies to charter schools, which are public schools. By statute, the town of Waxhaw has already concluded that modular classrooms are in harmony with the surrounding area when a school use is permitted on the site. Your ordinance does that. You say that if a school is allowed for a site, if it's a Union County public school, then modular classrooms can be used by right provided you proceed with the requirements for site approval and the like. I would submit that that is a legislative finding by the town of Waxhaw that modular classrooms where you have a site that is approved for educational use is necessarily in harmony with the area. We would also point to the surrounding zoning districts and the uses and suggest that what we have here is in harmony with commercial and residential uses. Modulars on Union County Public Schools, at Kensington Elementary, South Providence, I think the others that were mentioned, those are uses that are right adjacent to residential properties. So that certainly cannot be a harmony bar to the proposed use here because it's next to some residential properties. But even if that were to give the board concern, there is ample screening on this site of this building from the surrounding uses. The proposed modular is placed at the rear corner of a more than 10-acre lot, more than 500 feet back from Kensington. Very difficult to see from Kensington. We've met the setback requirements in the UDO. The plan exceeds the buffer requirements that are set out in the 2002 UDO. When you look at the aerial, there is significant screening, trees along the borders of these sites that creates separation of where the structure would be located from the surrounding uses. I want to, a point that came up, and Commissioner Warner made a good point about precedent, that this is a concern that the board has. And I think, all that we can say to that is your obligation in a quasi-judicial setting like this is you have to review every application singularly. And if the applicant meets the requirements that are set out, that meets the 4 findings of fact, then that's the showing that has to be made. And there's been nothing here tonight that has controverted that showing, and we believe we've carried that burden. So we believe that while that's a legitimate concern for legislative zoning decisions, perhaps we think that this is a very different proceeding and has to be conducted a little bit differently. On a final note, and then we're happy to answer any questions you have, this is a public school, and it serves a public function, and it provides residents in Waxhaw and in the county an opportunity to find a school that fits the needs of their children and fits the needs of their families. And we think that Union Day School and the church as its landlord are proposing a use here that clearly fits within the plan of development of the town of Waxhaw for that very reason. And we think that at the very least, the families of the more than 300 students at Union Day School who live in the town of Waxhaw, many of whom are here tonight because they support their school, we think they would wholeheartedly agree that this is in harmony and in line with how they want to see their hometown develop. So unless you have any questions, we're happy to rest and close the public hearing.
Commissioner Warren?
Yes, so I just want just a little bit more clarification. You just referenced Section 9.22 of the current UDO. So are you saying I understand you saying you're a public school, but would you say you are or are not part of Union County Public Schools?
I would say that's irrelevant. So I think.
So you referenced it though.
Yes. Let me explain why I referenced that. So okay. I think the function that Section 9.22 plays here relates specifically to harmony. So let's say you have a site that's zoned C3 on either side of a street, okay, and they both are approved for educational use, and one of them is a Union County public school, and one is a private school, or one is a public charter school, like we have here. Section 9.22 of your ordinance says if you have a site that is a C3 site that is approved for educational use, then by statute, a modular classroom is necessarily in harmony.
You left off a little part, though. It says specifically to Union County Public Schools.
Again, that's not the point I'm making. I want to be very clear what I'm saying. I'm talking about use in the abstract.
Okay.
So if you're saying Union County Public Schools can put a modular classroom on a site that's approved for, educational use in a C3, we think that's a finding that use there is in harmony with the area, because by statute you allow it. And I would say that should entitle other uses, educational uses, that want to use a modular classroom to that same presumption of harmony. Leaving aside any of the open questions I understand you all have about how 9.22 would apply to this particular school, I'm raising that solely for the point of harmony. If it's in harmony at Kensington Elementary School, I think it's certainly in harmony for another educational use that is permitted under your ordinance.
Whether 9.2 applies here is irrelevant.
It is irrelevant whether
You're making a point about whether or not modulars are harmonious for the town.
And I was going to state that they stated that from the beginning in our staff report says it doesn't. I was going to bring up some testimony, but they stated numerous times it doesn't apply. They're using it for harmony, so that doesn't affect the town's position, which is contrary to that in the staff report, and we could put up a witness about that, but they've said 3 times. They're using it for an analogy on harmony, not for the application.
It's a point about conformity, right? If this was a Union County public school on this same site.
Point understood and taken, okay? Got it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Fitzgerald.
Are you willing to give us any other guarantees besides your personal oath that you're going to have this building removed in June 31st of 2019?
I think that's a discussion when we get to the conditions, and then we have to have a discussion as to whether or not they accept the condition.
That's correct.
Correct, and we have to they have to accept conditions, and if they don't, and something that's important to you, it could get denied, but we also have to give them a fair and reasonable opportunity. So they understand that is a concern of several of y'all, and I saw them note they're going to discuss that. So that will be one of the conditions, and that can be during deliberation.
Right, right.
That's fair, yeah. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you for your time. I appreciate your patience.
thank you. We're going to take a quick 3-minute recess, and we'll reconvene in about 3 minutes. Okay, we have 3 individuals that would like to make their thoughts known. Dan Gingrich.
Good evening, members of the board, Mayor Maher. My name is Dan Gingrich. I live at 8309 Havron Street in Waxhaw. My comments seem fairly inconsequential at this point, as much more smarter and more eloquent people before me have already spoken. But I think it is good to hear from a resident of Waxhaw and how, at least I feel, about the school and this application. I wanted to come to speak tonight to ask you to approve the request from Union Day School and Forest Hill Church to allow for this temporary use of a modular classroom on the backside of the church property. I'm a resident of the Curitan subdivision and have spoken to this board numerous times in the past in regards to development that I thought was not good for Waxhaw or for Curitan. Because of the proposed location of this classroom, the obvious positive impact it'll have on the students and teachers and parents of the school, and the fact that it'll be temporary in nature, I do not feel this will have a negative impact on Curitan or Waxhaw. I've driven by this location many times, and the planned location of the classroom is barely visible from Kensington Drive. The temporary classroom will add no additional traffic to the site, as the classroom will be used for students that already attend the school, not new students. The classroom will result in 0 additional students. It will simply be used as a way to provide the students who currently attend the school the adequate space they need to learn in a more comfortable, less confined space. I'd also like to point out that on September 13th, 2016, a resolution was presented to the board from Mayor Maher in support of charter schools in Waxhaw. A motion was made by Commissioner Warner to adopt the resolution, and the board unanimously approved that motion. Just to refresh your memories, a few takeaways from that resolution were, whereas charter schools add to the quality of educational alternatives available to a community by achieving high degrees of success in meeting and exceeding educational standards. I've seen the state report on this school. They are easily exceeding educational standards as outlined by the state of North Carolina. Whereas charter schools have an exceptional level of parental support and involvement. Looks like that's true. Whereas charter schools are public schools held to state and federal guidelines, and whereas Union County has experienced significant population growth, and whereas residents have requested the town's support of charter schools in the Waxhaw area. That resolution, according to the minutes from that meeting, was, like I said, approved unanimously. I've got 3 daughters in Union County schools. None of them attend Union Day, so I do not have a personal dog in this fight. I feel like allowing the school to use this space is simply the right thing to do for the children attending the school and for the teachers who are doing their best to educate these children in a very restricted amount of space. It's my understanding the school is currently in search of and possibly in negotiations for a permanent location for the 2019-2020 school year, if not sooner. This is a temporary request. It's not a permanent, it is a permanent structure, but for a temporary use. I would suggest before voting on this application that each of you visit the school to see firsthand the great work they're doing, but also to get a feel for the challenges they have in terms of space. I would ask that you do the right thing here and give these kids the space they need for the next 18 months. It will have little to no impact on Curitan or Waxhaw. It will have a huge impact for these students and this school. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Greg, you want to come? I apologize, we started up before Greg could get back to his seat.
That was a practice run.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dan. Yep. Adair Howell?
Hello, everyone. My name is Adair Howell, as you just stated. I live at 7109 McCaslin Lane, and that is in Waxhaw. It's on the outskirts, but it's still Waxhaw. The absence of a modular unit for our school has a tremendous impact on our students, staff, and our community. While we are able to manage, it is less than ideal for our students and for our staff to endure in this manner for the rest of our school year. The addition of our modular unit would have no impact on the current amount of traffic that our school brings to the Curitan area, as our enrollment numbers would not change. The school would still be servicing the same amount of students, and the amount of our carpool traffic would not change. The students occupying the modular unit would transition utilizing the pedestrian walkway to the building and before the carpool process begins. The students would be dismissed from the main building to be loaded into their vehicles in the same manner that we have been dismissing for the last month. We understand that the town of Waxhaw is very concerned with its image, but the addition of our modular unit would not impact the overall view of the Curitan area. The designated area for the modular unit is surrounded by a tree line, which creates a buffer between the traffic on Providence Road so that the units would not be visible from the road. The Curitan Shopping Center has changed immensely from its original 2002 plans. The Goodyear was supposed to be parallel to Providence, and it's not. The gas station was not in the original plans because we didn't know that we were going to put one there. The Dunkin' Donuts that's supposedly supposed to be coming in was not in our original plans. The construction trailer that's currently very visible from the road does not sit harmoniously with its surroundings, but it has been permitted without an issue. Our school community has brought a tremendous amount of business to the shops in the Curitan area. The staff and student families are constantly shopping at the Harris Theater because of its convenience. We stop in for Starbucks, and we could probably own stock in Starbucks for how much we're there. We pick up lunch at Moe's or Ming Fu or any of the other little restaurants frequently. If it's the town's concern that the addition of one modular unit would encourage the school to stay in this small location longer, then the town has greatly underestimated our school's vision. We are not thinking small time, small town. We're creating an entire community, that, as you can see tonight, that fosters an engaging educational experience for all children. Allow me to leave you with this. John Dewey, one of the first advocates for the public school system, said, "If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow." Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer? Jennifer? I can't read the last name, but hopefully that wasn't the siren. Okay. Looks like starts with a B. B-L-A-M-Y, maybe? Blamey?
She's not in here.
Okay, she's not here. All right, that's it for those that wish to speak. Any other additional comments that the board wants to? Conclusion from all, not the conclusion. The reaction is we still have documentation that our zoning administrator needs to review. We have actions from the applicant that will capture all that you presented and consolidate that into response to the concerns as well as conditions. And I think what we agreed to, or at least discussed, that would make sense to recess until.
Yes, we need to do time, date, and
Yeah.
place.
I just don't have the date in front of me. It's the 24th at 6:30 PM, I believe. So I would need a motion for that. Correct, Chaplain? I'm
yes.
just looking.
No, and then there was, because we need to get staff to provide
Correct.
testimony. So it would be a motion to recess until October 24th.
At 6:30 PM.
6:30 PM.
In the
Here at the community
community
room in Waxhaw, North Carolina.
Unless there's any other thoughts, I will entertain that motion.
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.